Something happened in Indiana this week that deserves more attention than it's gotten, and once you lay out the pieces side by side, it gets hard to look away from. Two bench players got cut loose. Both of them landed with the Las Vegas Aces. And the reaction from Fever fans wasn't the usual grumbling you'd expect over a roster trim in the middle of a long season. It was something closer to exhaustion. The kind of tired that comes from watching the same pattern repeat itself, except this time the pattern is playing out around the most important player this franchise has ever had. Let's start with what actually happened, because the numbers matter here. One of the two players cut was putting up real scoring efficiency in a bench role earlier this season, then missed a stretch of games that the team attributed to illness, and shortly after that she was simply released, with Las Vegas picking her up almost immediately. No trade, no return, just gone. The other one was even harder to explain away. She was shooting well above 50% from three-point range in limited minutes, the kind of efficiency teams usually build a rotation around rather than cut. She's now also with the Aces. Meanwhile, a guard whose defensive numbers have been rough this season, and whose overall production has reportedly dipped compared to last year under a different coaching staff, keeps her rotation spot without much explanation offered publicly beyond the word culture. That's the part fans keep coming back to. Not because they're being unreasonable, but because culture doesn't hold up as an answer when the players losing playing time are outperforming the ones keeping it. If you're building a roster around a playmaking guard like Caitlin Clark, the math is pretty simple. You want shooters who can space the floor and defenders who can cover for her on the other end. Cutting shooters loose to a division rival doesn't fit that math, no matter how many times the word fit gets used in a press conference. And it matters who picked these players up. The Aces aren't just any team snapping up bench pieces. This is a franchise with ownership that's used to winning at the highest level, a head coach who was seriously in the conversation for NBA jobs a few years back because of the work she did as an assistant under one of the most respected coaches in basketball. Whatever Indiana let go of for nothing, Las Vegas got for free, and that's not a small thing in a league where every bit of depth counts down the stretch. Now overlay all of that with what's happening to Clark herself. She's working her way back from injury, and by her own account, she's hoping to be available soon, likely on a restricted number of minutes, somewhere in the low 20s if things go well. That part is normal. Players come back from injuries on restrictions all the time, and there's nothing inherently alarming about a cautious return plan. What got people's attention was how she talked about it. She started to say her hesitation wasn't about health, then caught herself and clarified that of course it partly is about health, but that a lot of it is just about getting back into rhythm. It's a small moment. It might mean nothing more than someone choosing her words carefully in real time. But paired with everything else going on around the team, it read to a lot of people as someone who's measuring what she says publicly against what she's actually feeling, which is its own kind of signal even if nothing was technically said. Then there's the schedule itself, which adds a layer of tension that has nothing to do with basketball strategy and everything to do with basketball business. Indiana has back-to-back games coming up, one of them against a team the whole league wants to see on national television, especially if a certain former MVP is back in the lineup for the other side. Clark has essentially said she probably can't play both games on a restriction, so somebody has to decide which game she plays, and the uncomfortable question hanging over that decision is whether it's being made for her body or for the ratings. That shouldn't be a hard question for a team that has its priorities straight. The fact that it even feels like an open question says something. Step back and look at the roster as a whole heading into this stretch. Two bench shooters gone to a conference rival. Clark coming back on a limited number of minutes. The team's other lead guard already carrying a heavy offensive workload during Clark's absence, which means more fatigue heading into a stretch where the team needs her fresh. And the defensive numbers at guard still shaky, with the underperforming piece still in the rotation. On paper, that's a backcourt that's thinner than it was a month ago, at exactly the point in the season when depth starts to matter most. None of this means the coaching staff is acting in bad faith. It's entirely possible this is what it looks like on the surface, a series of individually defensible decisions that add up to something messy when you view them together. Teams misjudge chemistry, misread who fits a system, and get individual calls wrong without there being some larger hidden agenda behind it. That's a real possibility, and it's the more boring, more likely explanation for a lot of what's happened. but it's worth taking seriously why fans aren't landing on that explanation, because their frustration isn't coming out of nowhere. It's coming from having watched years of Indiana basketball where roster decisions didn't track with what was actually happening on the court, where coaching changes came and went without a clear competitive plan showing up in the results. When you've watched that cycle enough times, it's not irrational to be skeptical the next time it happens, especially when the stakes have gone up because the best player of her generation is now the one whose prime is on the clock. That's really what's underneath all the frustration in Indiana right now. It's not really about two bench players. It's about whether an organization that's had a rough decade of decision-making has actually changed anything fundamental now that it has a generational talent to build around, or whether it's making the same category of mistakes with much higher stakes attached. Talent like Clark's doesn't wait around for an organization to figure itself out. Primes are finite. Every season spent on rosters that don't complement what a player like this can do is a season that doesn't come back. So where does that leave things? The most likely read is that this is a competent front office making a series of debatable, individually explainable moves that happen to look bad stacked together, and that the actual test is what the roster looks like heading into next season, not this 1 week of transactions. The less charitable read, the one a lot of fans are gravitating toward, is that there's a mismatch between what the coaching staff says it values and what actually shows up in playing time, and that no amount of talk about culture is going to fix that gap if it's real. Either way, the next few weeks matter. If Indiana comes out of this stretch with a rotation that actually reflects who's playing well, if the players who get minutes are the ones producing, that's a pretty strong signal the front office is paying attention and course-correcting. If the same pattern holds, if production keeps losing out to whatever fit is supposed to mean, then the frustration building in that fan base isn't going to fade, and it's going to keep attaching itself to the one player this franchise genuinely cannot afford to lose the trust of. Clark is expected back on the floor soon, on a restriction, doing what she can within it. The roster around her is thinner than it was a few weeks ago, and the fans watching all of it are going to keep asking the same question they've been asking all year. Is this organization actually building something around the best thing that's ever happened to it? Or is it repeating old habits at the worst possible time to repeat them? That's the story right now. Not a conspiracy, not a certainty, just a set of facts that don't add up cleanly yet, attached to a fan base that's run out of patience for waiting to find out which explanation turns out to be true.